Welcome to Ground Control. Today's guest is Daniel Rock. He's the Chief Revenue Officer at SweetFiles, a technology executive and revenue strategist who spent more than 20 years helping organizations build, scale, and optimize their go-to-market operations. He's got a deep expertise in SaaS, growth, leadership, sales enablement, and customer acquisition. He's passionate about turning organizational knowledge into business results, which is why we had him on. Daniel, I'm super happy to have you here.
Thanks, Brian. That makes me sound almost like I'm actually quite good at what I do. Thank you. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Too. Yeah. Well, we're excited to have you. So you got into sales, right? By ringing your account manager. I read on your site that you were in IT, that's a pretty big jump, and didn't seem like when you were a kid, you grew up wanting to be in sales. So I'm curious how that, how did it happen? How did it come about?
Yes, it's an interesting one. I'm not sure anyone ever chooses. There aren't many people, I think, that actually go, yep, I want to do sales straight out of school or uni or something like that. I think the vast majority of people I speak to, and I think someone told me, it's like, well, over 70% of people that end up in sales kind of fall into it. And it's sort of something you end up doing rather than something you chose. For me, it was a little different in terms of, I came out of school, college, and did IT. So I was IT admin, IT manager, and all of that kind of stuff, working for a reasonably small media company based in New Zealand at this, and we had this big technology and business project. And what I found out is I actually enjoyed the business problem I was solving more than just playing with new techie and toys. And I liked the business problems we were solving. That was sort of interesting. I literally just rang up my telecom account manager, and I said, look, to her, is there anything going? Kind of, this is what I'm doing. And I'd known they'd just bought two IT companies. So this was the big New Zealand telco at the time. It was called Telecom. It's gone through a couple of different brand names since then. And they had just bought two IT companies, and they kind of didn't really know what to do with them, as typical telco fashion. And so I just said, hey, look, this is what I'm looking to do. I kind of want to do the business problem solving consultancy. And they said, actually, yeah, maybe. And then 6 weeks later, I was working there as what they called a technology manager, which was effectively a IT sales consultant. And with no IT sales experience at all, not really a clue what I was doing, but trying to learn very quickly.
That's great. It's funny. I'm gonna ask you something that maybe Brian would Brian, don't cringe at this, right? But Daniel's got this interesting point of view, I think, about curiosity and salespeople. The best ones, right, are the most curious ones and the most honest people in the room. Now, I don't know if that's the part. So many salespeople get hit with reputations of being the opposite of that.
Yep.
But you're talking about the best salespeople are the most curious, right? And the most honest people in the room. Why is that? Why is it that you think that that's the case?
I think there's two things. One is the way that you make the prospect feel when you're talking to them on a micro level. I think that when you're genuinely curious in people and their problems and what you're trying to fix, you get them more engaged and they feel better buying from you. They trust you more. It builds a better piece. So that's kind of the fuzzy bit, I guess. And then you've got the sort of the more practical business bit is if you're curious, you're going to find out more. And what makes you good is being able to find out more and actually solve problems better. And I think one of the things that I always took, probably because of the background, was that sales is effectively problem solving. You're trying to solve a problem for a client, and if you can. And if you can't, you walk away. And I think that's something a lot of salespeople don't do. But actually, if you are curious, you're much more likely to find out what the real problem is. Because often people sometimes don't know what they don't know. And I think that comes with prospects. Now, prospects today are better informed, better researched. They come to you, far further along the process of their buying journey than they ever have done before. But they still don't necessarily know. They kind of know what they want. Sometimes they don't really know why they want it. And your job, if you're really, really curious, you can help them understand the why as well as you, which means you can align your problem better. You can articulate your value statement better. You can just generally be better at what you do. And you don't get that if you're only sort of ticking off a list of discovery questions, right? You've got to be genuinely curious and engaged with your prospect.
That's interesting. So, when it comes to the person who's basically been trained on how to deliver that sales pitch, they've practiced it 100 times. If I'm understanding you correctly, it's totally lining up with personal experience with salespeople, right? The person
100%.
who's actually having a conversation with you and is listening to you and listening to you identify what the challenges you're experiencing are, right, is going to have the best opportunity to sell something to you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like and you can put it into any phase of life. Obviously, we're in SaaS and B2B, and it's
Mhm.
bigger and it's more complex, and you deal with multiple people and all of that stuff. But even right down to if someone's trying to buy a car, and you go
Yeah.
into the thing and they're just trying to push this, and they're actually not asking you like, well, what car do you need? What are your requirements? Do you have kids? It's that basic curiosity of asking good questions and then responding to the answers. And I think that's the thing that a lot of salespeople don't do, which is where I talk about the curiosity piece. Is most salespeople are really, really good at asking questions. Because if you're not, you're probably not going to last very long. You're really good at asking a list of questions or basic discovery questions.
Yeah.
Where I think salespeople sometimes fall down is the next question and the next question afterwards. So I always talk to my team about it's about listening and not waiting to speak. And a lot of the time it's, all right, I'm going to listen. I'm going to write down my answer to what you said. Right now, I'm going to ask the next question rather than actually taking in what they've told you and going, oh, that was really interesting. Can you tell me more about that? Or actually, can we dig into a little bit more about this? Because that's where the nuggets really lie often. It's that deeper dive, that next question in. That's where the real value is a lot of the time and separates you from kind of people who are just reading off a list.
Like I'm getting a live training right here,
Yeah.
Brian, during the call itself. So like,
Well,
I'm like, all right, Daniel, tell me more.
so with Daniel, like one of the things that I focus on, like I'm in sales as well, is when you first join like a call or when you come in, a lot of times people are hesitant that, like their sales barrier is up because they feel like you're going to sell them something. Like, what are your thoughts on tonality and breaking that frame? And how important is that for actually getting to the real discovery so that they can actually trust and share their problems with you?
It's very important, but sometimes not as important as I think we make it out to be. And that is going to contradict slightly to what I talk about. Is I think it's interesting because one of the best salespeople I ever worked with, and he was really, really good. His customers hated him from a personality perspective for the most part, but he was really good at asking questions, really good at being curious, really good. He just came across quite blunt and so they didn't, hating was a bit strong, but he didn't exactly create wonderful rapport. But he was really good at getting the value and providing value to them. Now, that's a lot easier to do if you've built rapport and you're likable. And I think the thing I talk to my team about, and it's quite interesting when you bring on a junior salesperson, because one of the first things that junior salesperson will do, you say, right, go and watch all of these videos and demos and sales calls that all of our team have done. And there's fantastic tools out there now. Like we use Grow AI, which is brilliant in terms of being able to record and train and develop our team. It's a fantastic product. And so you throw all this at all of them. And then the first thing they're doing in every demo or call they do is try to be somebody else. They go, okay, Luke or Bob or Julian or whoever is, they're brilliant. I'm going to try and be them and mimic their phrases. And it's awful. Because so the most important thing to do is for them to be authentic to themselves. It's their own personality, their own voice, their own, yes, you build his topics, his the kind of the value statement, his our branding. But I think when it comes to that rapport piece, the easiest way to do that is to be authentic. And again, curiosities can't really be faked. You've genuinely got to be interested in somebody. Like if you're faking it and you're not kind of just going, oh, I don't really care, but I'm just going to ask these questions. The person on the other end of the call knows that. They can feel that. So it is a case of being authentic. That rapport is like genuinely taking an interest in what that person is.
The same thing with you know having to basically step into part of the sales process now that AI has taken over a lot of the initial communications, and then it's really building that rapport and bringing authenticity back into the conversation. Because I mean, at this point, I think everybody's trying to figure out like what's the most efficient way for us to start engaging with prospective customers, and the answer is AI. But when AI becomes that initial conversation starter, right? You literally have a machine doing the work, and it doesn't have authenticity, doesn't have humanity, it doesn't have true curiosity.
I'm not sure anyone's hit the best way to do that as an outreach. I think that's a really interesting thing for us. And we're incredibly heavy users of AI.
Yeah.
What AI is brilliant at is efficiency. Where I think you have to be really careful is efficacy, right? I think
Mhm.
that's like, it's very, very easy to turn around outbound emails, proposals, follow-up emails, all your HubSpot or Salesforce or CRM admin, all automating all that process. It's really, really good to do that. You've got to be careful that you don't lose the effectiveness of it and it doesn't all become generic. Because what AI is brilliant at, and we, like I say, we use it heavily and I love it. And we've trained multiple custom things to work the way that we want it. But what you got to be really careful at is like you pointed out there, you don't lose that humanity, right? And I think the best salespeople will use it to make themselves more human and more present in the room, right? And I think one of the things that I'm trying to challenge my team with at the moment is after you get off a sales call, close the AI summary, close the note taker thing. What did the customer want? What was their needs? Could you describe the prospect? How much were you listening or how much were you relying on the AI to do that for you? Because we can get lazy really easily, right? We can get lazy and let the AI do the work, but then it becomes very generic. And I think that, don't get me wrong, I think AI is a fantastic tool for salespeople. And I think, one of the things I talk about in the book is it's raised the floor so much because the floor for salespeople, like you used to just have to be competent. Well, AI can handle competence, right? If you're only competent, AI, you're not going to get a job because AI, you have to be at a level now, but the ceiling is where that humanity, that being ability to be curious, get involved, spot the things that AI gets wrong, and really engage with your customers. And I think that there's circles, right? And you see at the moment, there's a lot of kind of cold calling, human-based telephoning kind of stuff is coming back into vogue, because there's so much slop that is outbound AI driven that people start to ignore it. And so it's that, how do you inject humanity into that process as much as you can, but allowing AI to scale you, make you more efficient, be able to do more and do it better?
Have you tried any of these tools or have you seen? I mean, I'm going to rephrase that. So I heard on a webcast like about 2 weeks ago, CEO talking about a pretty impressive sounding product that's also a little bit scary. And it is an AI technology that takes the place of SDRs, BDRs, AEs, and customer success managers by using AI to deliver all those things. And then I happened to kind of end up inside of a sales situation where I think one of their AI agents was actually, acting the part of a human person on the other side of the call and doing a demo. And it looks pretty realistic, right? At the same time, no matter how realistic it can look and how well it speaks, it still is not going to have that humanity that we're talking about. So have you had a chance to kind of to look at and see any of those tools and what are your thoughts on where, I mean, you've kind of said it already, but just kind of getting directly to it. When it comes to things like that, are you going to directly oppose having your company adopt that sort of thing? Are you watching to see what happens as things go further? What are your thoughts?
Definitely not opposed. And I think that's one of the things, I think sometimes because I talk about the humanity and curiosity, that it can feel like I'm anti it, and I'm not. I think that if it's done well and it can work, I'm all for it, because I think scale and reach is one of the hardest things.
Yeah.
I don't think it's there yet. So there's a couple of things. I think we've tried a lot of the AI outbound email stuff. We do use AI chatbots on our site for when people visit us and stuff, and that actually works pretty well. Certainly from a initial, hey, you're looking at this, can I help you? That we found works really well on sort of managing that little bit of inbound in terms of, sort of inbound, outbound. We tried quite a few different variants of email outbound and various things like that without a great deal of success in terms of some of the AI SDRs. I think what I've found and what peers have told me is it's really effective for the first week or two, and then it dies. It uses up all the hot leads because it's really good at doing things quickly, but it isn't necessarily, again, the most effective way of doing it. And I think the AI SDR voice kind of call demo thing, I think there's places for it. I think there's some really useful CS things. There's a tool that it can go out and do some customer interviews of people that you won a deal or lost a deal and things like that for. I think that's really appealing because that's something you can scale quite well. It's a set interview process. It's things like that. I'm not convinced. There's legalities around it being cold calling. Certainly in most regions, whether that's the EU or the US now, it's fairly significant fines if you don't get prior consent. And you're not going to ever get prior consent to be cold calling from an AI. So there's a bit of a danger and risk to that. So yeah, look, I think there's potential, and I'm not anti it if it can be done well. I think we're a very long way from it running the entire sales process.
Yeah. It's interesting. You said like it's not quite there yet, right? And still open to the idea. Brian, I'm thinking about like completely different direction, but the not quite there yet that we were seeing months ago with when AI was putting together proposals, right, or answering RFPs or that sort of thing. Daniel, on your side, like I'm sure you've kind of run across a scenario with your team or just in your experience where something's gone dreadfully wrong when you're relying on the technology when it's not quite there yet, and a person doesn't take the time to review the work beforehand. Anything that comes to mind on your side? We love grabbing some of these stories and sharing them with folks where it's like the nightmare scenario.
Well, we've had it where and it nearly went out. It was caught at approval stage, thankfully, where we've told people we do stuff, the product does stuff it doesn't. Because the AI has gone, yeah, okay, great, yeah, I promise you that. And you're like,
Yeah.
No, the solution doesn't do that. Please don't say that. And I think it's that, I think one of the things about AI right now is it's a people pleaser, right? It wants to please you. It wants to give the right result, as much as want is a description for a non-sentient thing. But
yeah,
you do have to watch that, and catch those things. So yeah, it's like the old days when you used to just reuse an old proposal, right? And you used to do like a find replace and you'd forget to change bits. AI makes that process better, and it's going to be better in a lot of ways finding that stuff, but it's still going to make mistakes. You still have to read things, make sure it fits your tone, you can build all the writing skills and tone skills and product knowledge skills you like inside of a database. There's still a level of humanity of going, yeah, let me just check that.
Yeah. Yeah. Brian, do you remember that we had one that we'd had somebody share with us where they basically had gone in they had a team member, I don't know, new sales guy, who knows what it is, but just decided like, instead of going mea culpa, like I've had this sitting in my email, right? The RFP's been sitting there and, and just saying, I missed it. Can we go ahead and like either decide we're not going to answer it or get the RFP response team or somebody to go and just do that heroic act of putting something together in a matter of hours. And instead they just threw it into ChatGPT and it looked pretty good and not even reviewed it, sent it out. Now, in this case, right, I think the scenario was that they told us that what came back was after the deal was closed. After the deal was closed, the customer was saying like, hey, like we haven't finished the implementation because there's all these other things you guys have to do still. And they said, we don't do that. Where'd you get that? And they're like, it's in your RFP response, right? And we built that into the contract. So it could get pretty bad. Yeah.
Yeah. And and I think that's one of the things around it is the commercial risk side of these things is really, really high, which I think, we want to speed things up. We do want to remove bottleheads. And I think there's great applications for it to do. So bottlenecks, there's great applications for doing that. But there's a level of, we need to check. You need to check, you need to read. And again, I think that, AI is really good. It's a pattern recognition tool. AI still to this day it's very advanced, it's very clever, but it's pattern recognition. And it has a huge, enormous database of patterns it's trying to recognize. But it doesn't really read emotion. It doesn't really read the body language of someone that you're on a call with. And, you can tell sometimes that someone is excited by something by the look that two people share across the table. Right, yeah. That's the thing I now need to focus on. That's the thing I now need to go and sell to. Because if AI is not going to pick that up, it's not going to pick the look that people share. And I think, that quite often if you're selling to a room of people, it's that you have to watch for. And that's where, just that judgment isn't there yet.
Daniel, I think that's such a good point. Like in our calls, we obviously have AI note takers that are taking notes, but it's not to rely on those. It's to be able to look at people's expressions and do the things that I think make sales, professionals that are successful, which is reading the room, understanding. You might even see that somebody's curious or confused just based on something quickly on their eyebrows might furrow or something while you're saying something. And then you can pause and Like, what are your thoughts on some of the things that you feel like AI does great, and then things that you feel like it just can't, it's not going to replace anytime soon?
It's fantastic at admin. It's fantastic at summarization. For me, some of the things, I'm trying, for me, it's how do I automate bits of my day that I don't want to do? You know, I'm a I'm
Yeah.
a fairly typical salesperson, right? I'm not necessarily, I don't necessarily love admin and CRM hygiene and all the other bits that you can never get. And it's really good at that stuff.
Mhm.
It's really, really good at that. It's really good at updating the things, and it's generally pretty accurate. It's generally really good at going, okay, this deal should be in this stage. Here's the notes, and it's pretty good at looking at sentiment and information and buying scores and all of that stuff. So really, really good at that stuff. It's very good at giving you the basis of the pain points and next steps that you need to build a proposal on. It's very good at 90% of it. That's where I think, good salespeople can use that to go, great, I've got this information. What am I missing? And how do I
Mhm.
go and get that? How do I fill in those gaps? How do I understand? Hang on, that's not quite how I remembered this. And I think that's where it lacks still, because it's not going to engage. It can't engage you in the way that a human can. I bang on about the curiosity thing. AI is never going to be curious. It jumps to give you the answer it can give you then, right? It wants to give you a quick and accurate answer. It isn't going to go, well, why have they told me that?
Mhm.
What drove them to be here in the first place? And it's not going to do that piece. And I think that's where there's a huge potential in trying to harness those two pieces together. If you're really good at sales or go to market or marketing, there's a huge amount of opportunity in using AI to scale the 80% of work that can be done quickly, efficiently, with minimal input, allowing you to focus on the really high value stuff. And I think that's the real key: is how do I get myself doing the high value thing? I know as a leader, like, there's work now that I do what it would have been, a BA or two BAs, a load of work, a load of reporting, a load of data intelligence that would have took me 3, 4, 5 days to pull together. I can now do in a couple of hours and pull this data together. And it's really good at that. You still have to know your data because it's still going to make mistakes, but it does allow you to be a little more strategic, even though it itself isn't strategic, because it's good. It's really good at giving you the data and the information you need to do that. And that can be both at a macro leadership level, but even as an individual salesperson within your portfolio. Where is it lacking? Who hasn't been contacted? What information could I be doing? Have a look at my portfolio. Hey, let me do some lead gen and some customer insight stuff. Brilliant at research. It's brilliant at kind of opportunity identification. So you can use that to scale and get targeted really, really well. It's fantastic at that. It's adding the emotional intelligence that it can't do.
You said you love admin work so much and you love all those repetitive tasks. I'm guessing that RFPs are another one of your favorites, right? Going through and answering 300-400 question RFPs. It's just, you wake up and you're like, oh my God, do I have to do this today?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, they're not top of my list. Yeah, no. I know your guys' bread and butter, which if I try and avoid them like the plague, if I can, trying to get ahead of them. But every now and then you're going to have to do one, right? And they're a love-hate relationship, right? If you have a bid team, that's great. If you're a large business, you
Yeah.
have a bid team who can do a lot of, filling a lot of that stuff, and you've got a great library and information. I think for most businesses, what they spend their time doing is going back, looking through old ones, trying to find the answer that best fits, and then trying to shoehorn it into the new one because the question's slightly different. And I think that's
true.
always a painful
That's
point.
true. On that side, sorry. Yeah, on that side, on the honesty part, right, that you're talking about before, I'm thinking about it and I'm like, you can have a completely honest salesperson, right? And especially if it's like huge teams and they've got like a dedicated RFP response team or a deal desk or something like that, then the work can flow to somebody else and they're handling a lot of that. But when people on the sales side are just trying to get these activities completed, because it's a critical part of the sales process for some of these deals, having bad information, right? Stale information can make it to where they end up giving the wrong answer. And I'm just kind of curious, like on your side, You mentioned like people would go out and they're just like, let's look through the past RFP responses and grab one that's the best. What do you do to make sure that you don't end up grabbing something that was great at one point in time, but just isn't true anymore?
Look, and I think it's a really interesting one. There's a process piece, right? And I think I was talking to Brian before the recorders, and we're tangential relationships in terms of the products that we both sell, but in
Yeah.
no way competitive. But we perform sort of similar functions in terms of, hey, if this data exists, it's got to be up to date. Your version's got to be good. You've got to have the tools to control that information. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that that's where a lot of businesses fall down. And I think a great example for us is like we often don't do a huge amount of RFPs, but what we do a lot of is a lot of security questions.
Yeah.
A lot of security questions, right? What give us this, give us that, give us this. And that data changes, as sub processor lists change, the compliance information that we're working through, or we've changed a piece of infrastructure that's different. And so you've just got to make sure that data is up to date and is accurate. And I think that's one of the things that really good tools, whether that's RocketDocs or that's Sweet Files, can help with managing that data, making sure that's in the right place, that knowledge bases are updated. You can see when they were updated, when they were done. But also sometimes the AI can be a blessing and a curse in terms of that space, because it can go and pull the latest data, but sometimes you need to double check. Where did you get this from? Cite your sources. Don't just put it out, because it could be it's found a document that was 2 years old and updated information from that. So yeah, it's a process and technology issue.
Yeah. It's a process and a technology issue is probably the best way I've heard anybody put it for a little while. You need to have the tooling, but the tooling on its own is not enough. How much time do you think each of your sellers ends up spending each week right now, finding or refining or rewriting something that, has already been created? Either the company already knows, or, like one of the folks on the InfoSec questionnaire, right? They know that the InfoSec team's already built out a great answer. It's been just even a week and a half, and it's like, where is it at? Where is that piece of information at? How much time do you think that the team's losing right now going out and looking for things that they already know is there?
Yeah, now not much. I think we've got that. We're pretty good in terms of that piece now, and I think that's both for the templates that we use and how they're updated and the knowledge bases that we've built. That certainly wasn't always the case. That
Yeah.
and I think that if you were to look at where we were probably 2 years ago, then yeah, I would say that every time we did one of these, we would start from scratch, and you'd email the product team and go, "Hey, I've got these questions. Can you please
Mhm.
answer them for me?" And the product team would get really annoyed at you because, like, I answered this 3 weeks ago or 6 months ago. What do you do with those answers? So I think that building those knowledge bases, building that information to hand is much more valuable, is done better now than it has been.
Yeah. How did you guys end up building the knowledge bases that you've got? What'd you end up doing?
It's a mixture of places, which is probably not ideal. Obviously, we've got some native stuff inside of Sweet Files in terms of where that lives, so folder structure, tag information, security questionnaires. We also use Confluence for some areas as well,
Mhm.
which is always an interesting one, because the sales people don't use Confluence. They wouldn't even know how to log into Confluence if they tried. But the product team know where it is, and our AI talks to Confluence to bring that information in. It knows where to get it when it's updated. So yeah, it's a mixture of things, but yes, it is that case of it's very much being built rather than stuff. And I think if we were doing, a lot more sort of structured RFQs where that information is being reused a lot,
Yeah.
it would probably break. So
Yeah.
we're not quite there yet on that.
So yeah, it's funny. Salespeople in Confluence don't. It's kind
Yeah.
of oil and water type thing, right? But I mean, it's usable, right? But then even inside of that, and I know that there's like Confluence, like they've built a lot of tools for being able to do search and stuff. For the tooling that you guys are using, like, do you find that it's easy to search through? Do you find that it's easy to find the information, and what'd you do to organize it to make it to where, if it is easy, what'd you do to make it to where that information is able to be accessed easily through a
Yeah.
search?
We're pretty, in terms of our product, in terms of Sweet
Yep.
Fast product, we're pretty good with that. Our search
Yeah.
is really, really functional.
Yeah.
It's incredibly functional sort of free text search over and above what you'd expect in a sort of standard DMS.
Right.
And we're then able to use a lot of dynamic filters to find the right documentation, who wrote it, where it is, and then be able to piece that together in terms of templates. So we have the ability inside the product to build some AI templates as well as some non-AI templates that can pull that data in from data sources and provide something that's coherent. So we're really fortunate in terms of the product that we built for our customers. Now, we're not designed we're not a sales product, but we're able to make it work for us because of that. We have integrations with HubSpot and bring that stuff into our deals. So,
yeah, it's an interesting thing because like being in the space, you again, even if it's not specifically for that, like it puts you. I mean, would you say it kind of puts you guys ahead of the curve versus sales peers in other spaces that don't have that in-house tooling?
Yeah, I absolutely think so. I think and regardless of what industry, I think one of the things that I've been quoting this a little bit on sales calls recently, and I can't quite remember who did. It was either McKinsey or Gartner, one of the two of them. There was a report recently, the average employee in a office-based role spends 2 hours a day looking for things. And so that's looking for electronic data. And so I'd imagine salespeople, it's worse because we're a lot more, kind of information brokers, like finding and giving and finding and giving. And, it's just such a horrible waste of time when you think about it from a leadership perspective and trying to optimize your team. If they're spending that much time looking for stuff, if you've got a business that's set up to have that stuff to hand, have that process automated, bring all that stuff in from a knowledge source, you're at a significant advantage in both the efficiency and the efficacy piece, because you're able to respond accurately, quicker. You're going to be the one that they remember because you got it right. So all of those sort of things are really important.
Brian, I think you'd found some similar information about that, right? Yeah.
I did. I think I found the same exact article. It was like a day, I think, like a full working day that they wasted looking for information. So it's clearly a problem. And I think bring it back to curiosity. A lot of the people that we work with are in that are probably listening right now are in pre-sales, not necessarily sales. But do you feel like when we free up time, right, when we have an accurate source of truth for them to be able to get answers quickly, right, for RFPs or technical questionnaires, et cetera, like how do you think somebody that relies primarily on text to be their form of communication, like can they still apply any of the rules from curiosity in a way that makes them stand out with that extra time?
Absolutely. I think the medium is less important than the intent. And I think that there's a really interesting way. I think salespeople, and I would say technical salespeople particularly, have a tendency to ask leading questions or to structure a question or a piece of information to get information in the way or the answer that they want. Right. So, is it right that I should assume this? Or can you tell me more about this specific thing? Rather than actually opening up the question, say, hey, look, I'm looking for some more information. Can you share this? And that's often because we're quite literal people. We want to, we think in literal, logical, diagnostic terms. And pre-sales is a lot like that, because pre-sales, you are trying to build a solution based on information most of the time. And look, your job perhaps isn't to find out the need and the business stuff and all that stuff. You've been engaged to do this stuff to build a technical solution. But actually, being curious at this point could open up so much more. It's like, well, hey, this is what we've got.
Yeah.
I'd like to understand a little bit more about how you're going to use this. What is it you're trying to achieve and why are you trying to achieve that, so I can make sure I get the right solution. Now, that question could be asked in email, it could be asked in a Slack message. It doesn't matter how you ask the question. But if you ask a genuinely curious question, you're going to get a more detailed or better response in a lot of ways than you are, can you confirm that this looks right? It's a very different, it's a different mindset more than anything else.
It's kind of like the following up email, right? Like, hey, just following up. It's like, that doesn't help them at all. So don't send it, right?
Yeah. Or the just checking in email, which we all send sometimes.
Checking in.
Just want to check in where you're at in your process.
Like, are you really just checking in? I'm doing fine, thanks.
No, and that's the honest piece, right? And that's one of the things I talk to. It's like, don't just say, it's like, hey, look, I want to sell this to you, and you're not getting back to me. What can I do? Right? It's like, obviously in slightly more professional language than that, but they know you're a salesperson. Your prospect knows that that's what your job is. Don't hide that you're doing that. be honest. It's like, I want to help you, and unless I get this information from you, I can't help you get the best solution. And therefore we may not be the best option. But if you give me this information, then I can tell you if we're the best option or not. And actually, genuinely, I will tell you if we're not. It's that, being honest and upfront with people around what our jobs are. I think people feel sometimes a little ashamed of whether they're in sales or marketing or whatever. It's like, no, people know what your job is, and they've engaged you, and they still know what your job is. So be honest around what you're trying to do.
There's no reason to dodge it, right? It's the proposal, the proposal that's put together, right? That dodges the point of, like, I'm actually, like, literally at the point where I'm trying to sell you on purchasing our product. That's the whole purpose of the proposal that's going out the door at that point. And it seems like, companies are either, sometimes going to the path of not being persuasive anymore, not trying to just honestly say, like, this is why you should, helping the buyer make a decision, right? And then probably even worse, is when they have it to where that task, that critical part of just saying, like, this is why you should choose us, this is why you should buy my product, is going over to have AI do the work. And
yeah,
what was it? I think we had one of them where it wasn't plain vanilla. The person had actually brought it to a whole nother layer where it was just like noxious vanilla or something. And just the removal of any difference whatsoever between different suppliers who are all relying on the same AI technology to put together that final proposal that's supposed to just say, I want to sell you this. This is why my product works for you based on the things that you've told me.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting one with proposals, because there's many schools of thought on proposals, like, in terms of they should be works of art and great big long things, or they should be, to the point. And I'm a big fan of proposals that are very much to the point. This is what you told me. Here's the problem we're solving. This is how much it's going to cost you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And let me take you through this. It shouldn't be this great big log, because let's be fair, if you send someone a 25-page proposal, they're not going to read it most of the time. They're going to look at the exec summary and they're going to flick to the price, because that's what most people do. And then they're going to go, okay, and first they look at the price and go, okay, you're within where you should be. Let me have a conversation. I'll read some of the other bits and stuff like that. But it's transparency in sales is so important. And I think, again, as I sort of said at the beginning, buyer journeys now are very different to what they were when I started out in sales 20 odd years ago. It's, back then it was, as a salesperson, we really controlled that journey a lot of the time back then, to a point. But, they came to us and we built this proposal and we had these conversations and we were the expert and we taught them what they needed and we did all of these bits. Now they've done, whether the information they've got is right or wrong doesn't necessarily matter, but they have done a huge amount of research beforehand. They've ranked you against competitors. They've got a rough idea of how much you're going to charge you either by looking at your website or by comparing you to competitors. So you have two options at that point. You're either an order taker and you hope you get the deal and you're out of control. And if that's not where you want to be, or you find new ways to add value and be curious and understand their point better. Because even if you're confirming what they've told you, they feel good about it because they got it right. And if you're challenging them and say, hey, actually, no, you should probably look at this, you're adding value in a positive way. So either way, being curious and being diligent in what you're doing and trying to be different from just being the volume player that just chucks out a standard proposal on every deal, which we've all been guilty of. We've been guilty of that. Like, hey, here's a standard proposal. Let's just get it out. It's cookie cutter. It's fine. There needs to be something in each deal that's about them. Because every sales process has to be about the customer, not what your process is, not what you're trying to do. It should be about what the customer wants, not what you want.
I think that having knowledge that's kind of up to date, access to it, to be able to get a first draft quickly allows you to be a little bit more creative, as well as curious kind of about what challenges they actually have. And then maybe you have a solution that they haven't necessarily thought of, or there's a way that your technology applies to a root cause that maybe they're addressing the pain, but not necessarily what's causing the pain. So, and that often, have you run into anything like that, Daniel, where you've dug a little deeper and found more opportunity?
Most powerful question in sales is there anything else? Right? Is there anything else I can help you with? But no, it's exactly that. And I think that's one of the things that if we use AI well, that's exactly the point, Brian. I think you've hit the nail on the head with that. If you use it well, it frees up time and headspace to focus on the other things. Because rather than, I think, if I go back, back in the day, you've got your notepad next to you and you've got a load of things and you're scribbling notes down, which was great because it made you remember things. I'm always a big fan of actually writing things down physically makes you remember things. But also sometimes it meant you weren't necessarily looking for the other cues and doing the other things that you should be. But also it meant you were, here's all the information I need to gather. So I'm going to focus on gathering that information, which meant that sometimes you weren't able to relax into the call, let the conversation flow where it wanted and just steer it gently. And I think having that backup, the AI note taker, the things that's going to make sure that you get all the information out, you can make it a natural conversation now rather than it being a discovery call. It can be a natural conversation in which you do discovery, but allows you to go off on tangents and go into different places, and knowing that, crud, where do I write that down in my list of things? It's all going to get itself sorted out in the back end and allows you to be a more present salesperson.
It's interesting because I'm still like note taker, right? Even during our conversation, I'm like jotting things down, and it's gotten a lot better because I don't have to look where I'm writing anymore. I don't care what it looks like; I can find it. But each one of those activities that you're having to run as a process during the sales call is potentially a risk that's going to take you out of the actual conversation, right? It's going to make it to where you're running a script versus being curious. You're not asking the question, or if you are, it's just, following procedure, right? Is there anything else? And it's like, you're not really asking, you're just saying it because somebody told you that you need to say this. Kind of want, I'm thinking back in my head about like experiences that I've had with incredible salespeople when they're selling something to me. And the point that resonates the most that you're talking about is that it's when you're actually still interacting with that person. And then I was thinking about it. I think it's the same thing inside a proposal, whether it's longer or shorter, although I agree with you. Like if you write 25-page exposition, right? Who's got the time to read it? But when we connect with people and take the time to do it, we get better results. Is that the thing that you see? When you look at other sales teams, you look at your own sales team, do you see that people are getting better results when they're carrying out those best practices?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you find that the people that get the best results are the ones where they connect with people. That doesn't necessarily mean they're likable, which does help, but that they connect with the person that they're on the call with. They do that, but actually they've used that connection to get more information, and then they're able to articulate what they've learned. And I think that's one of the things. It's slightly tangential, but one of the things I like to ask salespeople, what's the last thing you learned, and they explain it to me, right? And I think what people's way of learning is a real way that if they like to learn things and they're curious and they want to accumulate information, they're going to do that on a sales call, which then gives them more ammo. And like Brian, to touch back on I'm just following up, I'm just checking in. It's the people do that when they haven't been able to understand what the value or the problem is. That's where if you're able to go, hey, instead of, hey, I'm just checking in. Last time we spoke, you mentioned that you had this problem and it was costing you this and da-da-da. I would have thought that's still a priority. How do we get moving on this? It's a very different follow-up email, right? Because you're actually, here's all the stuff I know that you told me is an issue. It's costing this per day. How about we make this more real? Look, is that email going to work every time? No. There's sales coaches will tell you this is the perfect email. It's going to work, and you still get ignored. But it is a case of, it's certainly better than doing, hey, I'm just following up or I'm just checking in.
Yeah. So one more for you. It's the finding the time to do that, right? So do you feel like at this point in time, the time that you spent, the time that your company spent, building out those knowledge bases, right? And putting some structure and organization around it to, again, like, whether it's one day or 2 days that's being lost, it's all too much. Does that buy back the time that's needed to be able to spend meaningful time with prospects and customers to move them through that process?
Yes, I think there's no doubt in my mind that it's an investment, but it's it's not an investment that has to stop you doing other things. I think, yes, there's got to be an owner and there's got to be some responsibilities and on, you know, you're going to get into racy matrices and all the other stuff. But yeah, yes, I think any time you invest in the infrastructure and the plumbing, as long as you do it well and the data you put in is good, is going to pay dividends because it's about scale. And I think AI tools will allow you to scale that, will allow you to bring that out into a productive way. You know, I think that it's no longer a case of, hey, I've now got to go and read 17,000 pages of documents to pull this together. It's actually give me summaries on all of these, give me the best answers, da da da. Now I'll check this. But you're able to bring that speed to market and speed to process much faster.
Last one for me, and then we'll go in and give you an opportunity to kind of finish out. But how much time does your team end up spending chasing down subject matter experts, SMEs, to get them to help provide information that your team needs to complete opportunities?
In my team, not that much.
Yeah.
And part of that is the style of product that we sell. We're a SaaS product. It's configurable rather than customizable. And so there probably isn't as much need to do that. Like, we're not a large engineering firm. We're not, you know, a big IT service provider where you're doing very bespoke custom solutions where you really need that SME.
Yeah.
But there is still a level of it, even in for us. You know, like, we've got product releases coming out on a regular basis. And where's that on the roadmap? What's happening with this? How do we do that? You know, and so look, we've built in some disciplines and processes to help us with that. You know, so we have regular cadences, regular check-ins where that information is shared and updated and then stored in a central location that people can get to. That always relies on the human going and checking that place and reading that information and doing the thing that they're supposed to do, which is always variable in its success. But look, I think we're better than most is the honest answer. But there's a lot of businesses where I would say I have worked in previous businesses where that's really bad.
Daniel, you know, we finish out ground control with every guest with the opportunity for them to share any piece of information that you'd like to share with the audience. Doesn't matter what it is. It's all your call. So anything that you'd like to share with the ground control audience, please do.
Well, obviously there's the shameless plug. I have a book releasing, or may have released by the time this comes out on the 1st of September, called Curiosity, How to Be Human When Selling in the Age of AI, which I think is a really cool premise. And we've kind of covered a lot of that today, which is great. But also for me, I don't really care if people buy the book. For me, it's like, if you're going to do this as a living, and I think it's a really worthwhile living, people are always going to need salespeople to do this and go to market people. You have to be curious. You really do. And I think that's going to be, you know, I've always believed in it. It sounds cheesy as anything, but curiosity is a salesperson's superpower because it's what's going to stand you apart from anybody else. The ability to really dig in and understand and kind of work out what makes people tick is a huge part of what we need to do.
Well, I'll double up your shameless plug, right? And say that just having gotten a chance to get to know you just a little bit and hear some of the ideas, I think this is something that is going to be tremendously helpful for anybody to read. So yes, you should go out and buy Daniel's book and definitely, you know, I think give it a read. The concepts of curiosity in the age of AI really are going to be the thing that carries through that humanity that we've talked about so many times during our discussion today. It's not enough to just have it to where, you know, you just show up and to Daniel's points earlier, you know, you're just waiting for your opportunity just to say something next and show that you have that human connection. It's being curious and actually wanting to know more about your customer, about them personally, about what's going on, the challenges inside of their experience at work, why their company is doing well or struggling, right? And then helping to solve those problems. Like, those are critical components. I'm very, very excited, you know, for the opportunity to read it myself. And so, yeah, I think definitely people should go out there. If you're in the space of sales, it's going to be something that's applicable to you based on the stuff that Daniel has been telling us today. I can tell you, even if you're not, it's still going to be a beneficial read. So, Daniel, is it going to be an audiobook as well, or we
haven't planned on the audiobook yet? I might well do that. It's at the moment is Kindle and paperback, so it'll be available on Amazon. And if people want to look, it's danielrock.co, so just my name.co, and there'll be a link on there to be able to go and buy that as well.
All right. Yeah. Well, Daniel, when you get it out on the audiobook side, you've got a great voice. I think you should definitely be the one who reads it. I've heard it's a ton of work. but well worth it. Let us know, and we'll go ahead and do an update on the podcast recording so that people can know where to find the audiobook as well.
Thank you, guys. Much appreciated.